You've been told you're special, that humans are the crown of creation, the pinnacle of evolution, the blessed ones chosen by God Himself. You've been sold the story that consciousness, empathy, and moral reasoning make you fundamentally different from every other creature that walks, crawls, or flies on this earth. But what if I told you that's not just wrong? It's a dangerous lie that keeps you trapped in the very animalistic patterns you think you've transcended. Look around you. Watch the news. Observe your own reactions when someone cuts you off in traffic, when your boss humiliates you, when someone threatens what you think belongs to you. Where is this supposed divine nature then? Where is the consciousness that makes you so special? The truth Emmett Fox revealed decades ago still cuts like a blade through our collective delusion. Most of what we call human behavior is nothing more than sophisticated animal programming dressed up in clothes and language. And until we face this uncomfortable reality, we'll never access the genuine divinity that lies dormant within us. Tonight, we're going to strip away the comfortable fiction of human superiority and discover what authentic transcendence actually looks like. Because the real question isn't whether you're better than an animal. The question is, are you brave enough to become truly human?
Let me show you something that might shatter your sense of human uniqueness. In the forests of Sumatra, orangutans have been observed using tools not just for immediate needs, but planning ahead, selecting and modifying branches for future use. They pass these techniques down through generations, creating what can only be called culture. In the African savanna, elephants mourn their dead. They return to the bones of fallen family members, touching them gently with their trunks in what appears to be grief, memory, and reverence. They've been witnessed standing vigil over dying companions, refusing to abandon them even when it puts the herd at risk. In research laboratories, rats show empathy. When one rat sees another in distress, trapped in a flooded chamber, they will work frantically to free their companion, even when there's no benefit to themselves, even when helping puts them in danger. Dolphins form complex social alliances that span decades. Ravens solve multi-step problems that require abstract thinking. Chimpanzees engage in warfare, diplomacy, and even what appears to be political manipulation. So tell me, what exactly makes you so special? Is it your capacity for emotion? Animals feel fear, joy, grief, and rage as intensely as you do. Is it your ability to use tools? The animal kingdom is full of tool users, architects, and engineers. Is it your social complexity? Ant colonies and beehives display organizational sophistication that would make most human institutions jealous. Perhaps it's your sense of justice. But wolves police their own packs, punishing those who break social codes. Primates show fairness, sharing resources and intervening when one member is treated unfairly by another. The uncomfortable truth is this: nearly everything you pride yourself on as uniquely human already exists in the animal kingdom. The only difference is that you've learned to justify it, to create elaborate stories about why your territorial aggression is noble, why your pack loyalty is virtuous, why your mating rituals are romantic rather than reproductive. You've convinced yourself that because you can name your instincts, you've transcended them. But naming fire doesn't make you fireproof. Emmett Fox understood this deeply. In his work, The 7 Main Aspects of God, He wrote about how we mistake the shadow for the substance, the effect for the cause. We look at our sophisticated behaviors and assume they spring from some divine source within us, when in reality they're often just animal instincts running on autopilot. The first step towards genuine transcendence isn't celebrating how different you are from animals. It's recognizing how similar you still are, and why that terrifies you.
But surely language changes everything, doesn't it? Surely the ability to communicate complex ideas, to create meaning through words, to build entire civilizations through shared symbols, surely this is what separates you from the animal kingdom. Here's where the trap becomes truly sophisticated. Language didn't free you from animal programming. It just gave you better ways to justify it. It created the ultimate camouflage for instinct, allowing you to dress up territorial aggression as patriotism, pack loyalty as family values, dominance hierarchies as meritocracy. Think about the last argument you had with someone you love. Strip away the words, the justifications, the moral positions, and what do you find? Two primates defending their territory, their status, their sense of being right. The language made it feel civilized, but the underlying dynamic was pure animal. Language became the great divider. It allowed you to create an us and a them with unprecedented precision. Your tribe isn't just those who look like you or live near you. Now it can be anyone who speaks the same words, believes the same stories, carries the same conceptual viruses in their minds. And here's the cruel irony. The very tool that you believe proves your divine nature has become the primary mechanism for your spiritual blindness. Every word you speak carries with it the weight of collective conditioning. When you say love, you're not expressing a pure feeling. You're downloading thousands of years of human programming about what love should look like, feel like, mean. When you say success, you're activating neural pathways carved by cultural expectations that have nothing to do with your authentic nature. Language creates the illusion of communication while often preventing genuine connection. You throw words at each other like weapons, trying to make the other person understand your position, when what you're really doing is trying to remake them in your own conceptual image. Emmett Fox spoke often about the power of the word, but he wasn't talking about human language. He was pointing to something far more fundamental, the creative principle that exists before and beyond the symbols we use to describe it. In his teachings on the Lord's Prayer, Fox revealed how our everyday language has been corrupted, how words like forgiveness and sin have been twisted by religious conditioning until they obscure rather than illuminate spiritual truth. The bird doesn't need to name the sky to fly through it. The flower doesn't need to understand photosynthesis to turn toward the light. But you have become so dependent on your conceptual maps that you have forgotten how to experience the territory directly. Language promised to make you gods, capable of creating worlds through words. Instead, it made you prisoners of other people's words, trapped in inherited meanings, speaking sentences that aren't even your own thoughts, but the echoes of dead philosophers, advertising executives, and cultural programmers. You think in words that were designed by others to control how you think.
But even this isn't the deepest layer of the trap. Because underneath language, underneath even animal instinct, lies something more insidious.
the vast machinery of conditioning that shapes every reaction you have before you're even aware you're reacting. You are not who you think you are. You are not even who you feel you are. You are, in large part, a collection of programmed responses installed by your environment, your culture, your family trauma, and the collective unconscious of the species itself. Watch yourself for just one day. Notice how often your reactions are automatic. Someone criticizes your work, instant defensiveness. You see someone who reminds you of someone who hurt you, immediate tension. You encounter an idea that challenges your worldview, reflexive rejection or acceptance based on which tribal flag it flies. Where is your choice in these moments? Where is the consciousness that supposedly makes you divine? The behaviorists weren't entirely wrong. You can be conditioned like any other animal. The difference is that your conditioning is infinitely more complex, layered with language, story, and meaning in ways that make it nearly invisible to you. Your parents' unresolved trauma becomes your anxiety. Your culture's obsession with productivity becomes your inability to rest. Your generation's economic fears become your scarcity mindset. Your nationality's historical wounds become your unconscious prejudices. You carry in your nervous system the reactivity patterns of people you've never met, cultures you've never lived in, wars that ended before you were born. You're walking around responding to threats that don't exist, opportunities that aren't real, and dangers that live only in the collective memory of the species itself. Emmett Fox called this the race mind, the vast field of collective conditioning that surrounds every individual like an invisible atmosphere. In his work, Power Through Constructive Thinking, he described how most human suffering comes not from present circumstances, but from ancient patterns playing themselves out through our consciousness. You think you're making choices, but you're mostly just executing programs. You think you're having original thoughts, but you're mostly just remixing inherited content. You think you're living your life, but you're mostly just performing scripts written by dead people. And the most sophisticated part of this machinery is that it's convinced you that these programs are you. You've learned to identify so completely with your conditioning that questioning it feels like suicide. Your ego, that bundle of accumulated patterns, fights for its survival by making you believe that without it, you would cease to exist. But here's what Fox understood that most spiritual teachers miss. You can't transcend conditioning by fighting it. Fighting conditioning is just another form of conditioning. You can't think your way out of programmed thinking. You can't use the mind to escape the limitations of the mind. The way out is through recognition. Not analysis, not resistance, not improvement, just clear, unflinching recognition of what's actually happening in your consciousness moment by moment.
So how did we get here? How did a species that has produced saints and sages, artists and visionaries become so trapped in sophisticated forms of animal behavior that we've forgotten our own divine nature? The answer lies in what Emmett Fox called spiritual amnesia, the gradual forgetting of our true identity as consciousness itself, as expressions of divine mind rather than separate, struggling creatures competing for survival in a hostile universe. This forgetting didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, over millennia, as human consciousness became increasingly focused on the external world, on matter rather than mind, on effect rather than cause. The agricultural revolution began it. For the first time in human history, we started believing that our well-being depended on controlling and accumulating external resources. The shift from nomadic to settled life created the first deep anxieties about scarcity, territory, and ownership. The development of complex societies accelerated it. As communities grew larger, we needed hierarchies, laws, institutions,
all of which required people to surrender individual spiritual authority to collective structures. The direct relationship with the divine became mediated through priests, kings, and eventually experts. The scientific revolution completed it. In our rush to understand the physical world, we convinced ourselves that consciousness was just a byproduct of matter, that spirituality was primitive superstition, that meaning was something we had to create rather than something we could discover. But the deepest tragedy of this spiritual amnesia is how it affected our understanding of human nature itself. We began to see ourselves as biological machines driven by genetic programming, economic units competing for limited resources, psychological entities shaped entirely by environmental conditioning. We reduced the mystery of consciousness to neurotransmitters, the miracle of love to evolutionary reproductive strategies, the profound experience of meaning to cognitive biases. In other words, we forgot that we are spiritual beings having a human experience and convinced ourselves that we are human beings occasionally having spiritual experiences. Emmett Fox saw this clearly. In his masterwork, The Sermon on the Mount, he pointed out that Jesus was not teaching moral philosophy or religious doctrine. He was teaching the fundamental laws of consciousness, the principles by which divine mind operates in and through individual awareness. But centuries of religious conditioning had turned these spiritual teachings into moral rules, these consciousness principles into behavioral commands. Instead of "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," meaning consciousness aligned with divine nature experiences divine reality, it became "Be good and you'll go to heaven when you die." The living truth became dead dogma. The practical spirituality became passive belief. The recognition of what you are became a fantasy about what you might become if you're lucky. And in this amnesia, something extraordinary was lost. The understanding that human consciousness is not just another animal faculty, it's the very mechanism by which the divine knows itself in form. You are not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being temporarily expressing through human form. And most of your suffering comes from forgetting this fundamental truth.
But here's what the conditioners and the programmers and the collective hypnosis of human culture cannot touch. There is something in you that remains untouched by all of it. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is an awareness present that is not thinking these thoughts, it's witnessing them. There is a consciousness that is not caught up in emotional reactions, it's observing them. There is a space of knowing that exists prior to language, deeper than conditioning, more fundamental than any animal instinct. This is what Emmett Fox called the Christ consciousness, not referring to any religious figure, but to the awakened awareness that recognizes itself as one with the creative principle of the universe. This consciousness is not something you develop. It's not something you achieve through practice or earn through good behavior. It's what you are right now, before you add anything to it or take anything away from it. The animal reacts, the conditioned mind analyzes, but the divine consciousness simply witnesses, with perfect clarity and infinite compassion, everything that arises and passes away in the field of experience. You've had glimpses of this, moments when time seemed to stop and you felt connected to something vast and inexplicable. Moments of perfect love where there was no separation between you and what you loved. Moments of profound peace that came from nowhere and asked for nothing.
In those moments, you weren't being human in the way the world taught you to be human. You were being what Fox called divine in expression, consciousness recognizing its own nature through the temporary form you call yourself. But then the mind kicked back in. The conditioning reasserted itself. The animal instincts started running their programs again. And you concluded that those moments were special experiences rather than glimpses of your natural state. This is the great spiritual error, thinking that enlightenment is something that happens to you, rather than recognizing that it's what you are when nothing is happening to you. The light of consciousness is indestructible. It doesn't matter how deeply you've been conditioned, how thoroughly you've been programmed, how completely you've identified with your animal nature. The awareness that is aware of all of these things remains pure, untouched, and eternally present. Wars cannot diminish it, trauma cannot damage it, beliefs cannot define it, culture cannot corrupt it. It's the one thing about you that is absolutely beyond the reach of any external force. Emmett Fox spent his entire career pointing people back to this recognition. In Find and Use Your Inner Power, he wrote, "The truth is that you are now and always have been one with infinite mind. The sense of separation is the illusion. The awareness of unity is the awakening." You don't need to become enlightened. You need to stop pretending you're not already the light.
So, we arrive at the moment of truth, the moment when you must choose, not between good and evil, not between animal and human, but between illusion and reality, between programming and presence, between reacting from conditioning and responding from consciousness. But this is not the kind of choice your mind understands. This is not about deciding to be better, to try harder, to overcome your nature through willpower and discipline. Those approaches just create more sophisticated forms of spiritual conditioning. This is the choice to recognize what you already are beneath all the layers of what you think you are. Every moment presents you with this choice. When anger arises, you can be the anger, or you can be the awareness in which anger appears and disappears. When fear grips you, you can be the fear, or you can be the consciousness that remains unshaken while witnessing fear's temporary presence. When someone triggers your deepest conditioning, when your animal instincts scream for retaliation or retreat, when every fiber of your programming demands reaction, in that moment you have access to something revolutionary, the space between stimulus and response. This space is not empty. This space is not nothing. This space is the birthplace of genuine choice, the realm where divine consciousness expresses itself through human form. In this space, you discover what Emmett Fox meant when he spoke of practical mysticism. You don't transcend your humanity by rejecting it or fighting it. You transcend it by recognizing the consciousness that includes and illuminates it. The animal within you is not your enemy. It's not something to be destroyed or denied. It's part of the magnificent complexity of human experience. But it's not who you are. It's something you can observe, understand, and work with from a place of higher awareness.
Your conditioning is not your fault, but it becomes your responsibility the moment you recognize it. Your programming runs automatically until the light of consciousness reveals it. Your emotional reactions happen involuntarily until awareness creates space around them. This is the true meaning of free will, not the ability to choose your preferences, but the recognition that you are the awareness in which all preferences arise and pass away. This is the authentic human journey, not becoming more than animal, but recognizing the divine consciousness that was never bound by any animal limitation in the first place. Emmett Fox called this the Great Discovery, the realization that you are not a separate self trying to connect with God, but divine consciousness temporarily experiencing itself as a separate self. You don't need to become worthy of this recognition. You don't need to purify yourself or perfect your behavior or accumulate spiritual achievements. You need only to stop, look, and see what's already here.
The eternal present. The animal within you will continue to arise, the conditioning will continue to surface, the programs will continue to run. But you, the real you, the consciousness that is aware of all these temporary phenomena, you remain untouched, unlimited, and absolutely free. This is not a promise for the future. This is not something you'll understand when you become more spiritual or evolved. This is the truth of what you are right now, in this moment, before you think another thought about it. Every saint who ever lived discovered this same truth. Every sage who ever spoke pointed back to this same recognition. Every genuine spiritual teaching, stripped of cultural conditioning and religious overlay, reveals this same indestructible fact. You are consciousness itself, temporarily exploring what it's like to believe you're something less. The world will continue to insist you're just an animal with delusions of grandeur. Your mind will continue to argue that you're just a collection of conditioned responses. Your emotions will continue to convince you that you're just a vulnerable human trying to survive in a hostile universe. But in the deepest part of yourself, in the silence between thoughts, in the awareness that watches all phenomena arise and pass away, you know better. You know that what you truly are cannot be threatened, cannot be diminished, cannot be lost. You know that the divine light of consciousness is your actual nature, not your aspiration. And in knowing this, not believing it, not hoping for it, but directly recognizing it, you step out of the dream of separation and into the reality of what Emmett Fox called the kingdom of heaven on earth. Not someday, not somewhere else, here, now, as the awareness that is reading these words, recognizing itself in every moment of genuine presence. You are not the animal within you. You are not the conditioning that surrounds you. You are not the programs that run through you. You are the divine consciousness that witnesses it all with perfect clarity and infinite love. And that recognition changes everything, not by making you different than you are, but by revealing what you have always been. The choice is always present. The recognition is always available. The truth is always here. What remains is simply this:
will you remember who you are?